Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Today in the rLounge, welcome to the tale of biological relatives who finally remembered you exist, right when you became worth something. Parents set me up for adoption because I'm a girl. Now want to reconnect because I'm wealthy. So yeah, I'm adopted. Always have been. My parents, the ones who actually raised me, told me from the start. They were good people who couldn't have kids of their own, so they adopted me when I was 3 days old. They never made it seem like some big secret or shameful thing. It was just what it was. When I was 12, I asked them what they knew about my biological family. They sat me down and told me the basics. Young couple, already had 2 daughters, gave me up for adoption because they didn't want a third girl. The last part hit different. Not because I was hurt or confused. I was angry. Even at 12, I understood how messed up that was. They had a preference for boys, didn't get one, so they just tossed me aside like I was defective merchandise. After that conversation, I decided I didn't care about finding them. Why would I? They made it clear I wasn't what they wanted. I had parents who actually chose me, who wanted me. My mom died from cancer when I was 18, right after I started college. It was brutal timing. I just left home, was trying to figure out the whole independence thing, and then she was gone. My dad and I got closer after that. We were all each other had left. Fast forward a few years. I graduated during the pandemic, started working from home like everyone else. My mom left me some money when she passed, and I got really into crypto early on. Made some smart moves, turned that inheritance into a solid amount. Then my dad had a heart attack. Suddenly, completely unexpected, he was gone before I even made it to the hospital. I was 24 and completely alone. No siblings, no extended family that I was close with. Just me. He left me the house and his savings, and combined with my investments, I was sitting on over $1 million in assets. I started a business not long after. Online, nothing that required me to be tied to one location. It took off faster than I expected. Within months, I was making more than I ever thought I would. I ended up selling a portion of the business and walked away with almost $4 million after taxes. I bought a house with cash, a really nice one. Posted some photos on social media because, honestly, I was proud. I'd built this all myself, from nothing, with no family support or connections. Just me figuring it out. A few months later, I did an interview for a business podcast. Some guy reached out asking if I'd talk about entrepreneurship and building something from scratch. I said sure. During the interview, I mentioned being adopted and losing both my adoptive parents young. I talked about building the business as a way to create something stable when everything else felt uncertain. The episode got shared around a lot more than I expected. That's when things got interesting. I got a DM on Instagram from someone claiming to be my sister, my biological sister. My first thought was a scam. I got messages from random people sometimes asking for money or trying to pitch me things, so I almost deleted it without reading the whole thing. But she included specific details. The adoption agency name, the hospital where I was born, the fact that she had 2 other sisters and parents who gave up a baby girl in 1998. The timeline matched up perfectly with what my parents had told me. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at her profile. It wasn't private, so I scrolled through everything. There were photos of her with 2 other women who looked similar, photos of older parents, family gatherings, holidays, all of them together looking happy and complete. Something twisted in my stomach looking at those photos. They'd built this perfect little family after getting rid of me. They got what they wanted. 3 daughters was apparently fine once they'd discarded the unwanted one. I still didn't respond to her message. She sent another 1 day later. More details about the adoption, about how she'd seen the podcast and recognized the story. She said everyone in the family wanted to meet me, that the parents had never stopped thinking about me and regretted their decision. Found the father on social media. He'd worked in manufacturing for 3 decades, was retired now. Found the mother's Facebook. She was one of those people who posts constantly. Bible quotes, family photos. Every other post was about, my beautiful girls. Or, blessed with my daughters. The comments were full of heart emojis and people telling her how lucky she was. I felt sick reading through it all. She'd built this entire online persona around being a devoted mother to her daughters, and I wasn't anywhere in that picture. Not a single mention. Not a single acknowledgement that she'd had 4 daughters, not 3. The sister messaged me again, said everyone wanted to meet me. Then I got a Facebook friend request from the biological mother. Her profile picture was a family photo. Her, the father, and the 3 sisters. 4 people who all chose to forget I existed until now. I declined the request. Within days, all 3 sisters had found me on different platforms. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. They were clearly coordinating this. One of them mentioned in her message that she'd seen how successful I'd become. The other one said something similar. Talked about seeing my house, my business, how well I was doing. Not one of them said they were sorry. Not one of them acknowledged that they'd lived their entire lives as part of a family that threw me away. They just kept emphasizing how successful I was, how impressive my accomplishments were. Then I got an email from the biological father. Long, rambling thing about mistakes and different times and cultural pressure from his parents who wanted a grandson. He went on about how they'd always wondered about me, always hoped I was okay. Then, right at the end, he mentioned that he'd seen I bought property and started a business. Said he was so proud of what I'd accomplished. Proud. This man who'd given me up for being the wrong gender was proud of me now that I had money. I hired someone to run background checks on all of them. If they were going to come sniffing around my life, I wanted to know exactly who they were and what they wanted. The report came back within a week. The oldest sister was drowning in credit card debt, over $60,000 worth. The middle one was going through a messy divorce and looking at splitting basically nothing because they had nothing to split. The youngest was unemployed and had been for almost a year. The parents weren't doing much better. Their house was mortgaged to hell, they had medical bills stacking up, and their retirement savings were basically non-existent. They were looking at a rough few decades ahead. It all clicked into place. They didn't want a relationship with their long-lost daughter. They wanted access to my bank account. The biological mother somehow got my phone number. I still don't know how. She called me and I answered mostly out of curiosity about what she'd actually say. She said she never wanted to give me up, that the father had made her do it because his parents were traditional and demanded a grandson. She went on about how hard it had been, how she'd thought about me every day, how she'd prayed I ended up somewhere good. Then she asked if we could meet for coffee. She said she'd love to help me since I've been alone after losing my adoptive parents. She actually said that, like she was doing me a favor by offering to insert herself into my life now that I had no one else. The father sent another email a few days later. He said the family was going through hard times and that family should help family. He actually had the nerve to say my adoptive parents would have wanted me to be generous with people who were struggling. One of the sisters called me. I answered because I wanted to hear what she'd say. She didn't waste time with small talk or fake bonding, just straight up asked if I could loan her $50,000 to pay off her debt. Said it was the least I could do since they gave me life. I posted on Reddit because I needed to tell someone what was happening and I couldn't talk to my parents about it anymore. I laid out the whole situation. Adopted because they wanted a boy. Radio silence for 25 years. Sudden contact right after I came into money. The sister asked for $50,000. The thing was, I couldn't just block them and move on. I was too angry. These people had thrown me away like I was nothing. Lived their happy family life without me. And now thought they could just show up and cash in on my success? Sent a group email to all 5 of them, both parents and all 3 sisters. Kept it simple and direct. You didn't want me when I was worth nothing. You don't get to want me now that I'm worth something. Lose my contact information. The mother called from a different number within hours. She was screaming at me, completely unhinged. Called me ungrateful and heartless. Said they'd sacrificed by giving me to a good family. And I owed them for making that hard choice. She actually framed abandoning me as some kind of noble sacrifice that I should be thankful for. The father sent an email the next day. This one was threatening. Said he'd go public with my cruel rejection of them. That he'd tell everyone how their daughter had abandoned them in their time of need. He was trying to flip the script, make himself the victim. The man who gave up a baby because she was the wrong gender was threatening to publicly shame me for not giving him money. 2 of the sisters showed up at my house a couple days later. I have a gate with a camera system, so I didn't have to actually confront them face to face. Just watched them through the cameras as they buzzed the intercom repeatedly. When I didn't answer, they started yelling at the camera. One of them was screaming about how selfish I was, how stuck up, how I thought I was better than them. The other one was crying and begging me to just talk to them for 5 minutes. It was a whole performance, probably hoping I'd feel guilty enough to let them in. I called the cops and reported them for trespassing. They left before the police arrived, but I had the whole thing on video. Saved every second of it. The biological mother posted this long thing on Facebook about praying for her estranged daughter who lost her way. Her friends flooded the comments with prayers and support, telling her to keep faith that I'd come around. She was playing the grieving mother card hard, acting like I was the one who'd rejected her instead of the other way around. Someone from the podcast reached out asking if I wanted to do a follow-up episode about everything that had happened. I declined. I'd said what I needed to say. I checked the father's social media one last time a few weeks later. He'd posted a photo of the 3 sisters with a caption about the daughters who stayed, but the comments weren't kind anymore. People were calling him out, asking about the daughter he gave up, questioning his character. His reputation was shot, and he'd done it to himself. Posted a final update on Reddit letting everyone know they'd backed off. Told them about the Facebook posts, the deleted TikTok, the community group blowback. People were satisfied. Karma had done its job. I realized after a while that I hadn't thought about them in days. That felt like progress. They'd taken up so much space in my head for months, and suddenly they were just gone. Back to being strangers, which is what they should have stayed. These people were just genetic donors who made a series of bad decisions and then tried to profit off the life I'd built without them. Update 1. Been a couple weeks since my last post. Thought this was done. It's not done. I'd blocked all their numbers and locked down my social media. Figured they'd finally gotten the message, then would move on with their lives. For a while, it seemed like that's exactly what happened. Radio silence for almost 3 weeks. Then I got a call from the detective who'd been handling some background work for me. Not for anything criminal. I'd hired a private investigator months back when this all started, just to keep tabs on the situation. He called to give me an update I hadn't asked for. Turns out the biological father had been fired from his job. The company he'd worked at for almost 30 years let him go. My detective contact said it wasn't directly related to me, but the timing was suspicious. Apparently word had spread in their community about the whole situation, and his employer didn't want the association. They cited restructuring, but everyone knew what it really was. The mother had to pick up extra hours at her part-time position to compensate. They were struggling to make mortgage payments on the house. A few days later, I got another update. The oldest sister, the one with all the credit card debt, had been let go from her position as well. Same thing. Her employer found out about the family situation and decided she wasn't worth the potential drama. She'd been working in a client-facing role, and once people started recognizing her name and asking questions, the company cut ties. She'd moved back in with the parents, 3 adults crammed into that mortgaged house, all of them barely scraping by. The middle sister's divorce had finalized. She got almost nothing in the settlement. Her ex had used the harassment situation against her in court, presented evidence that she'd been part of the group that showed up at my gate, that she'd participated in the online campaign against me. She walked away with basically nothing and was living in a cheap apartment she could barely afford. The youngest sister had lost her apartment too. She couldn't keep up with rent after being unemployed for so long. Last, the investigator heard, she was couch surfing between friends' places. I'd heard through someone who knew someone that extended family had started cutting them off too. The biological father had siblings who wanted nothing to do with the situation. They'd apparently told him that reaching out to me after all those years was a mistake, and when he didn't listen, they distanced themselves. Family gatherings were happening without the parents and sisters being invited. The whole family structure was collapsing, and I hadn't even had to do anything beyond refuse to give them money and tell them the truth about what they'd done. Around week 5, the private investigator told me the parents were looking at foreclosure. They'd fallen behind on the mortgage by 3 months. The father was picking up whatever contract work he could find, but it wasn't enough. The mother was working full-time now despite her being in her 60s, and they still couldn't make the payments. The oldest sister living with them wasn't contributing anything. She couldn't find work anywhere in town. Too many people knew who she was, knew what the family had done. Her credit card debt was still there, still growing with interest, and she had no way to pay it down. The middle sister had filed for bankruptcy. The divorce had left her with nothing, and she couldn't keep up with her basic expenses. She was working part-time at a retail job, making minimum wage, trying to rebuild from zero in her late 30s. The youngest sister had finally found work, but she'd had to move 2 hours away to a town where nobody knew the family name. She was working at a call center, living in a studio apartment that took most of her paycheck. None of them were talking to each other much according to what I was hearing. The sisters blamed the parents for pushing the issue in the first place. The parents blamed the sisters for being too aggressive, for showing up at my house, for the online harassment. Everyone was pointing fingers at everyone else. I got one more piece of information that actually surprised me. The biological father's parents, the ones who supposedly pressured him to give me up because they wanted a grandson, had cut them off entirely. Apparently they'd told their son that going after me for money was shameful and embarrassing to the family name. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who'd caused my adoption in the first place now wanted nothing to do with the mess their son had created. By week 8, the house was officially in foreclosure. The bank had started proceedings. The parents and the oldest sister had maybe 2 months before they'd be forced out. The mother had apparently had some kind of breakdown, ended up in the hospital for a few days, stress-related from what I heard. The medical bills from that just added to their financial problems. The father was working 2 part-time jobs now, one during the day, one in the evenings. He was 63 years old, should have been thinking about retirement, and instead he was working 60-hour weeks just to stay afloat. I still felt nothing hearing all of this. They'd created every bit of the situation themselves. The middle sister had started seeing someone new, but it fell apart within weeks when he found out about the family situation. Apparently he'd Googled her name and found enough information to decide he didn't want to be involved. She was back to being alone and broke. The youngest sister called the oldest one at some point, and they had a massive fight. The youngest one blamed her for escalating everything by being the first one to reach out to me, said if she'd just minded her business, none of this would have happened. The oldest one fired back that the youngest had been just as eager for money. They hadn't spoken since, from what I understood. The parents tried reaching out to their siblings one more time, looking for financial help. Everyone refused, said they'd made their bed and needed to lie in it. The father's brother apparently told him directly that trying to get money from the daughter they'd abandoned was disgusting, and he wanted no part of helping them recover from their own greed. By the end of 3 months, the foreclosure was complete. The parents and older sister had moved out of the house they'd lived in for decades. They found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a worse part of town. The rent was cheaper, but the place was cramped and depressing. All 3 of them were working now, pooling their income just to cover rent and basic expenses. The oldest sister had finally found something: night shift stocking at a warehouse. It wasn't much, but it was income. The father barely spoke anymore, apparently. Just went to work, came home, slept, and repeated. The whole situation had broken something in him. The middle sister's bankruptcy had gone through. She'd lost what little she had left. Started over with basically nothing at 40 years old. The youngest sister stayed away, didn't come back to visit, didn't call much. She'd escaped the immediate fallout by leaving town, and she wasn't interested in getting dragged back into the mess. Every desperate DM, sobbing intercom plea, every "we never stopped thinking about you" attempt, pure clown energy. They wanted to monetize your existence instead. They monetized their own downfall. And the father, giving up a baby for a grandson, then threatening to go public when the daughter they rejected ignores him, deserves a slow clap in hell. You didn't block them. You didn't retaliate. You just existed and watched the universe brutally roast the entire garbage heap of a family they became. What do you make of this? Let us know below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.